This tutorial is sponsored by Videoblocks. Hey, what's up guys, Chris Connor here and welcome to a brand new Creative Visuals tutorial. Today we're gonna take a look at an awesome effect I did back for my clients in Greece from the music video, and this effect takes place in the Death Soldier scene where the main character sees a hallucination of his friend and that character's hand is in flames with the talk ducks and everything, and I'm really proud of how the final look came to be. So with that said, let's take a look at the clip. As you can see guys, I'm very happy with how it ended up, the overall final look came to be, because I really think it hit a nail in what I wanted to achieve. And if you guys want to see behind the scenes and listen to a director's commentary that I did for this music video, I'll have the links in the description. Also, on that note, the description. If you guys want to have the assets as well as the project file and everything you need to make this effect, that is available as a pack on the Creative Store, which you guys can purchase for a small fee. The tutorial is free, but the assets and everything, because a ton of work went into it, will have a small fee, but that way you get everything you need and you support the channel for more awesome free educational content. So do make sure to check that out. Let's get started, and let's just take one small note to thank the guys that made this video tutorial possible for you, the awesome people at Videoblocks. Videoblocks is for us, the filmmakers, the VFX artists, the producers. It's a subscription-based service that offers members access to an amazing array of downloads, from stock footage, motion backgrounds, special effects, After Effects templates, and more. Their library consists of beautiful landscapes, wildlife, aerial shots, explosions, slow-mo clips, but the astonishing part is that they offer a 7-day free trial for new members, which is the best way to get introduced to Videoblocks, experience their service, and get access to stunning content for free. So guys, make sure to follow the link in the description, get signed up, and start browsing. Enjoy! Okay guys, so do make sure to check them out. Like I said, all the links you need will be in the description. And with that said, fire up After Effects and let's get started. So as you guys can see, I have the final composition here, which we're gonna go step by step and recreate. But I just wanna show you guys a couple of things before we get started with the actual effects. As you can see, I have my actual clip layers here in the color of purple, and then we have the null objects, which are the tracking points so that the fire can stay on top of the character's hand, in green. And then we will move on. The red color is for adjustment layers for specific effects. As you can see here, they go by name. And finally, the color yellow is set to the VFX assets that are being composited on top of the clip, and they're basically the fire and the particles. So if I open the eyes and grade composition just for a second here, we can see that I've isolated this layer, which is basically if I scroll through my timeline here, which is basically the clip itself, but it's being color graded. So that since this is a tutorial and I have to pre-record everything, the computer needs a lot of help and it cannot really do color correction and all of the color grading effects on top of the visual. So I pre-rendered the color grade version, and if I scroll through, you can see that we have the character, and the character's skin turns dark, which is basically a desaturation effect with a mask around his skin. And of course the eyes, which of course I have the famous tutorial on the Fantasy Eyes VFX tutorial, which you guys can check on the channel, and I basically used the exact same technique, if I can put this on full, to get the character's eyes look hollow. I think it was the 4th, I'm not sure, but anyways guys, the link will be in the description, so do check out that tutorial if you guys want to know how to do the eyes effect. And as for the skin, like I said, it's simply a desaturation adjustment layer, and from then it goes. So I pre-rendered this. If I unselect this, you can see we have the initial video clip here, which is, see how long it takes, because the rest is set on full. But anyways, I just want to take some time to show you this, guys. Really? Autosave, come on. Okay. So if I isolate the actual clip from the camera, which is right this one, this is how the original looks like, and with color grade and the skin and eye effect, we get to this one. So I pre-rendered this so we can help the PC, and so let me go back to the actual composition. So here we go. If I isolate this, this is the pre-rendered color graded footage with the skin and eyes effect, and if I scrape through, you can see, guys, it looks pretty cool. Now the first thing that we need to do is to track the character's hand so that we can position any VFX like fire that we want, and the clip will stay on top of the character's hand. But here's a problem. As the camera moves, we can see that there are not really any tracking points because the hand itself goes out of frame. Now, how do you continue to track it and make the fire stay where it's supposed to stay, whereas the tracking subject itself is out of frame? So I had to solve this, and I've did something similar in the past, so I knew how to tackle this before we actually shot this. So I knew that I wanted this type of shot that we moved from the character's hand and up to reveal its face and its transition. Now the trick is to actually split the layer itself and create multiple null objects, which all of them will then be combined to position the VFX asset on top. So if we can go back to the beginning, and I'll select my first null object, which I named Fire1. Now remember, guys, green equals null object. So as you can see, we have our null object, and I tracked the character's thumb here because it was a good tracking point. If I scroll through, you can see that that null object sticks to its to the tracking point extremely well. So if we go through, now here is where the problem comes in, because if I zoom in here, you guys can see that the null object is soon gonna go, it's gonna get lost because there is nothing to track, because the thumb itself is gonna get lost. So what I did is, if I press page down to go frame by frame, I went to the almost final frame where the thumb was visible, and I split the layer. You can split the layer by hitting Ctrl, Shift, and D, and I now have a perfectly continuous footage, but as a split layer. And what I can do now is I can use the first part of the footage to track this portion where the tracking point is still visible. So what I did is I went to the beginning, I right click, track motion, and this little thing comes up. I'm sure you guys know how to track, and I simply took my tracking point, set it there, resize it, and basically I simply hit analyze forward. And the trick is, because the layer is split there, the tracking itself will stop at that last frame. So there's no reason for it to go any forward, because we told After Effects that, hey, this is where my layer stops, so that's all you need to track. And here's the trick now. If I go to the next layer of the footage that we splitted, now I will open the second null object. here's the trick. Now I use this pin right there from the character's shirt to continue that tracking. So all I did is I scraped through here, and here we go. So I used this pin to track the following. So I did the exact same thing. Went to the footage, click on it, press right click, track motion. After Effects takes us to this page, and all I did is selecting my next tracking point and tracked that specific pin. Analyze forward, and that was it. So now if I scroll through, I have two null objects that perfectly continue the shot, and since this is not a moving object, it's perfectly fine to track it. So if we go forward, I did the same thing one last time, and if I open the third null object, we can see it's exactly the same. Actually, I'm not perfectly certain why I did this change here, but there must have been a reason, because this, guys, is the original composition for the final music video release. So anyways, I'm sure you guys get it, because it's pretty cool. So now we'll do the exact same thing for the fire clips, right? So I have my fire clips. If I open those up, and let's put this one to half for now. And here we have the fire. So what I did with the fire is the exact same thing that I did for the footage. When the time came to change nulls, I simply clicked Ctrl-Shift-D, splitted both of the fire layers, and then parented them to the next null, so then the tracking itself was seamless. So let's see how to do this. So if I go back to the beginning, that the whole hand perfectly is visually. So let me remove this for a second. So what I have here is a fire asset, and I brought it into the composition, changed the blending mode to screen. If you guys cannot see this, simply toggle this switch. And by putting it to screen, you basically change the blending mode of the layer itself to make it match the composition or the footage that you have more easily. So I brought this one here, and I brought number 2 there, and I simply played with the time of the fire itself to better suit the occasion of the footage itself. Because if you look at the first one, let me put this one on full for a second, it very nicely matches the character stamp. So the flames itself do not look fake, as they look as if they are motivated by the character's hand. And that's the trick with VFX. You need to find the perfect moment that the footage and the VFX movement align, and that's where the gold happens. So now that I positioned them, I select both of them and parent them by clicking this thing to our first null that has the first track that we need. So by doing this, if I scroll through the timeline now, you can see that the fire very nicely stays or follows better that null object that we have. So now you have a pretty cool effect where the fire stays in the hand and the whole thing looks super realistic, because why not? So what happened then, if I scroll to the next one, is, like I said, I splitted the fire effect. Let me open this once. And now, as we transition on to the next frame, that fire, both of those fire layers, I'm now said to them, hey, now you track fire number 2, which is our second null, right? So now, seamlessly, the two layers, because there's nothing in between, they will follow the next null object, but you cannot tell because the tracking points are exact and the movement of the camera moves in a very stabilized way. But even if it didn't, it would have the same effect. So now the fire perfectly moves on and continues, even though we don't have the character's hand to track anymore, which to me is pretty awesome, and it really solves a lot of things. And I actually used the same technique for the opening shot, where we had that long continuous shot with the smoke effect on the background, and I used multiple tracking points and used this exact same technique to carry on the tracking of the null objects where the smoke will be attached to without actually having the initial tracking point within the frame. And this way, as you can see, we have a very awesome fire flames effect that sticks and looks like it's part of the footage itself. So that's pretty cool. And that's pretty much almost like the primary effect, guys. I know it's kind of crazy, but bear with me. So now we have the fire, right? And we've tracked and we have our null objects and we can parent our VFX fire onto our character. Awesome. The next thing is to put a simple glow effect, as you can see here, and I'm going to show you guys how to do it. So this layer, color code red, is an adjustment layer, and you simply go to effects, you go to layers, new, and adjustment layer, and basically you create a new layer that has nothing on top. So if I go to effects, you can see I put a couple of things here, and let's see what those things do. So the first one is a curve adjustment, and why I did this. Basically, fire is more on the warm side, unless you want to do like a fantasy fire that is blue or green. So basically what you need to do is you need to color grade that adjustment layer to fit the tone of the VFX you're trying to affect, basically. So since we have a fire effect, I just did a curves adjustment and went to the reds and pushed them up, went to the blues, put them down a bit to create a more yellow tone. And basically that was it. If we go back to the RGB, as you can see, it's the same because I don't want to affect the brightness. Second effect is the exposure effect, and this is very, very important because this technique is also used to create lightsabers. So what this glow effect does is it creates a glow shimmering effect that fire, if it was real, would create light, right? Because it's light that flickers all the time, so there needs to be a light effect that also flickers on our character. So here's what we do. We create a new adjustment layer. We put it below the fire because we don't want it to actually affect the fire itself, but we want to affect only the footage that we recorded. So new adjustment layer, and we want a glow effect. So we first color that adjustment layer to be on the warm side, and then we put the exposure effect. So if we go to effects, color correction, and we scroll down here, you can see exposure. And by clicking it, you basically go here. But here's the trick. And that's a police siren. But anyways, so if you hit Alt and the exposure, let me hit Control Z. Actually, I'm gonna go through here, go to effects, exposure, and master, and exposure itself. As you can see, I put a wiggle expression. And why did I do that? By putting a wiggle expression, I tell After Effects, hey, I want this exposure effect to flicker by 15 points, 15 times a second. This is the first number, comma, 0.75, and that's the second number is the value. So I tell After Effects, hey, I want this effect to flicker 15 times in a second, and its value should go between the range of 0.75. So After Effects, because it's awesome, it automatically goes and flickers that effect. So if I put this back on half, I will try to preview this so you guys can see what I mean. So as you can see, guys, now you can see that flickering effect that happens, and that really adds in the believability, if we can say that, of the effect itself. So I'm gonna stop this now. So with the wiggle expression, we wiggle the effect, and it's awesome. So now what I wanted to do is to push the color correction of that effect even more. So I went to effect, color correction, and put a color balance effect, which you can see right here. And again, I did the exact same thing. I increased the reds in the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights, and I left everything else the same because without this, it's not as red as I wanted. So as you can see now, there's a big difference. And the last part, I simply changed the adjustment layer to screen to change its luminance. So if I put it to normal, you can see what it does, or if I change it back to screen, it's pretty cool. Now, it's important, guys, to remember that all those values are not fixed. For your project, you might need to change the the wiggle expression and maybe increase its rate or increase its value and play around. And that goes, it's the same thing for everything from the color balance values and all the other things. So I want you guys to understand the technique that it's used to create these things and not just copy paste things, because when you go to do your own thing, you're gonna have a hard time understanding why it does not look right, you know. So that's why I take the time to explain every little thing and also use the actual real final composition that I used to produce this music video. So as you can see, with the glow effect and the fire, we're getting very close to the final thing. So as you can see now, we have everything else. And as we shift, oh, before I forget, if I toggle in the mask values, of course I inserted a mask around the fire, because if we hit M in the keyboard, you can see I have two masks, one for the face and one for its chest. And basically it's the same concept as a Major Flash. Basically, the fire does not affect the entire frame, right? So since it's so close to his chest, it will affect his chest and his face more than anything else. Like, it would not affect that rock behind there because it's the middle of the day and that makes no sense. So what I did is I took my pen tool and I draw a mask around the areas that I want the effect to take place. And then by hitting F on the keyboard, we bring the mask feathering properties, and yet as you can see, I played around with the feather value. For the first one is 175, but then again, this really depends on your clip, on your situation, and what feathering values go in. So adjustment layer, just to have this cool glowing light effect, and that's it. So after that, I still was feeling like there was something missing to make this whole image more cinematic. So I inserted some pyro particles, and that really helped the overall effect. So if we open the fire particles on, you can see there, this is basically a simple clip of fire particles flying around. And because particles are not moving in a specific way and they're just randomly going around the place, I don't need to parent this effect, this layer, to my null objects. I can just simply drop it in, and I don't need to do anything else. I simply change its blending mode to screen or add. Usually that's what you want to do with like fire light layers of VFX, and that was it. So now the entire effect is done with the exception of a couple of things, but in terms of VFX compositioning within the footage itself, we're done. So I'm going to move on to the next one now, and as you can see guys, now this effect is real cool and it really boosts your VFX production, at least when it comes to fire and heat oriented visuals. So what I have here is another adjustment layer. Remember, if a layer, new adjustment layer with another mask. As you can see, same thing, I took my pen tool and I draw a mask, and what this adjustment layer aims to do is basically to simulate the heat distortion effect that comes from having a fire basically. So if we open this up, you can see, if I zoom in here, what it does, it basically creates that cool heat wave effect. And I used Video Copilot's heat distortion plugin, which is not free, but these guys over at Video Copilot are amazing, and I really recommend you guys to get this heat distortion plugin. Now, there is a way to do this effect without this plugin, and there are tutorials out there that show you how to do this. But here, simply all I had to do is use this plugin, drop it in, play with the values, and get the look that I was going for. So this really sells the fire effect of the visual, because it creates and blends everything so beautifully, because it creates that cool distortion effect. And of course, keep in mind the way that these layers are stacked up, right? The heat waves effect affects the entire composition, including the VFX behind it, even the particles. After that, I just put some other cool effects like a vignette to keep the viewer's focus on the character, a saturation effect to boost it up just a touch, with all the colors. Let me change this to full, and I will hide my mask paths for now. If we get this going, come on computer, you can do this, be awesome. Awesome. And the final part, this is very simple. I simply changed the aspect ratio, which basically means I just put the plug bars, and we are ready to go on render. So I'm gonna preview this thing for you guys, and hopefully we can get this computer to do this. Now I'm gonna drop the resolution to half for this, and let's do this. Okay, so let's see. This doesn't look like it's gonna let me preview any more from this. I will have to drop the rest, but I think this is gonna give us a pretty clear look of what is going on. So let's take a look. And yeah, that looks pretty cool. As you can see, guys, let me put the preview screen a bit there. Okay, let's see. So as you can see, guys, the heat distortion, the particles, the glow effect, and everything literally comes together to complement the effect. And it really comes down to making small adjustments and putting effects here and there, playing with values until you get something that looks good, right? And this is what we've done here. It's really a simple concept in terms of visuals. We have our visual assets implemented and tracked on top of the footage. We have a glow adjustment layer, a heat adjustment layer, and some particles flying around basically. Now the trick here was how to track something that we need to place our VFX on when that point that was initially there does not stay in frame for the entire length of the clip, of that sequence that we want the effect to take place. And I really think that by breaking up the clip and combining different null objects is a very creative and smart way to solve this problem without having to cut to another shot or not use the initial concept that you guys have in mind. So I hope you guys learned something, and I know that I'm going a bit fast, but I'm trying to put as much information as possible without boring you guys to death and going step by step and having a 2 hours tutorial or something. Okay guys, so that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Stay tuned for the rest of the tutorials, like the smoke effect on the background, the sci-fi gadget thing, the solo dust wave, and all the other crazy things that went in this project. And yeah, stay tuned, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Until then, stay awesome.